welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W., and I am an Episcopal priest. I live here in Austin, Texas, and have had the gift of sobriety since December the 27th of 1972. My guest for this series is a friend of mine by the name of Matt D., and Matt is in long-term recovery, also a long-time member, archivist, and head honcho of All Addicts Anonymous. And that is a program that aims to keep the original AA program alive. And I have a link to the AAA website in our show notes. And you might want to check out some of their online meetings as well as some of their very helpful literature. And in this series, we're paying special attention to AA's Dr. Bob, the second of our co-founders. And to explore Bob's life and his contributions to AA, we are using a book titled Dr. Bob and the Good Oldtimers. And there's also a link to that book in the show notes. Matt, welcome back to the podcast. I really appreciate your taking time, sharing your knowledge about the early days of the program.
Nice to be back. Thanks so much.
Let's pick up today with Chapter 12. It's titled Cleveland AA's Leave the Oxford Group. And the chapter starts off saying, there was only one meeting, the highlight of everybody's week. AA was growing, but not yet fast enough to make anyone uncomfortable. It quotes one of the pioneers, Bob E., saying, we started with just a few fellows horning in on an Oxford group meeting. We increased in number and noise until we took the place over. Instead of being the alcoholic squad of the Oxford group, we were the main body, and we had the most to say, and we were kind of running the thing. But we were limited. They called the shots. They were the leaders.
We talked about before this thing of regeneration, like regeneration of the physical body. You have cell proliferation, right? The cells in your body, let's say your liver or something, they're completely different cells every 7 years or something, right? They're being replaced all the time. AA is, as a regenerative movement and program, is coming out of this. It's coming out of the Oxford group. That's what we're going to be discussing, today. But you could start to see there's kind of a tension forming here. The steering committee of this first group was the non-alcoholics, but the majority of the people starting to, I wouldn't say take over, but starting to encompass the little group that they had there were the alcoholics, the alcoholic squad.
Yeah, and some tension is starting to build up, and we will feel that as we go through the chapter. So the alcoholics at this stage, they're starting to sort things out. We're not quite like these earth people, but they've got a hell of a good program, and there are certain things we want to take from their program and certain things we probably want to leave behind because they're just not going to work for alcoholics.
I know we keep bringing it up, but they were keenly interested in efficiency. And I think there's a reason for that, because an alcoholic is so beat up. I mean, if you had to swallow 47 pills, it isn't going to work, right? So they are extremely and keenly interested to find out what really works for the alcoholic and not add an ounce more on top of that for the already beaten and shaken and severely disturbed person, right? They're not trying to lay any kind of additional burdens on a person, no dogma, and they're currently sifting through all that. And in relating to the non-alcoholics, there's very often additional things added, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not dogma in any sense. I mean, Frank Bookman was kind of amazing in his ability to put together the Oxford group, and it was a spiritual power that influenced the whole world in an amazing way. It's literally changed the history of mankind in a very important way. It's just so critical for the alcoholic, so beaten, shaken up, incapable of understanding and also doing anything additional. They're really trying to figure out what is the minimum necessary for the person to achieve sobriety, and then from there to spiritually grow, right?
This is Dr. Bob's thing. Keep it simple, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't
That's
louse it
exactly
up.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So after a while, speaking of the tension, not only did the alcoholics want to leave the Oxford group people themselves maybe wanted some of the alcoholics to leave also. There was tension on their side too.
And in a way, if I was, somehow chosen in the spiritual scheme of things, and I was a non-alcoholic, and I witnessed, somebody throwing a shoe through a expensive stained glass window, I might feel the exact same way myself.
Yeah, that's something that happened in New York City at Calvary Church, where Shoemaker was head honcho of the Oxford group.
So
Yeah.
you can, again, this is just cell division. It was necessary, I think, for the we talked about primary purpose. The primary purpose of either movements to kind of start to separate, but the separation doesn't occur without tension and suffering and difficulty.
Right.
It's like birth pangs.
Exactly. Some of them were concerned that it was kind of we alcoholics were lowering their prestige in the community. They also kind of wanted the movers and shakers in the community to belong.
And there's many who use this biblical quote where it says, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confine the wise.
Mm-hmm.
And the alcoholics, if anything, are foolish in a sense, spiritually foolish, confounding the wise. This idea of prestige, and it worked in a certain way in the Oxford group. They set out to find very key pivotal people who were influential. They also were looking to efficiency. So they wanted to look for people who, if they were to have a conversion, would also affect more people. We have this frame of mind after going through COVID and everything else, but it'd be like somebody who was in contact with the most people. It's like if they were infected, if you will, with this spiritual bug, they're going to pass it on to more people. And AA just they did, again, as part of the AA efficiency, they had to worry about one drunk at a time. Well, they did look for certain attributes out of certain individuals. They were out trying to sober up an editor so he could help work on the big book before he even, they were picking out people in that way, but it was extremely minimal. And they were really working with people who were just totally down and out.
Yeah.
Different movement.
That's and when we're ready, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, we're out of family, we're out of friends, we're out of money. Right. And that's how we come to this thing. We don't come to it as, CEOs of tire companies.
Right. The chapter lists several reasons for the eventual split between the Oxford group and the emerging alcoholics. And some of them I noticed in this book are a little bit different from the usual ones that AA historians focus on. So it might be worth going through the list. Let me read them, and then you might comment if you have something to add. So one was the alcoholics wanted to confine their work to alcoholics only.
I mean, again, this is a movement coming out of another movement. Every single addict that's listening to this podcast knows there's a comradeship you have with another addict, and a love. I mean, Bill Wilson referred to it as agape, as God's love for man. It's like the love from one drunken bum for another, and that's there. And you also see in the critical state of ego collapse or paralyzation, that occurs very often, not always, but it's more prevalently occurs in an addict, right? When somebody's really down and out, they need this thing and they are so desperate. And you can understand how we started to work with one another. It started to really work. A fellowship started to flourish based on that idea or fact.
Yeah. The alcoholics were starting to insist on anonymity at the public level, whereas the Oxford group wanted you to broadcast your membership in the group.
Yeah, again, I think this has to do with the Oxford group's method of trying to reach more people. We think of alcoholics a little bit differently now. This is many, many years later. At that time, it was it was a moral scourge. You would tend to, I think, people look down on alcoholism in a way now that we don't. Try to I'm just losing my track here.
The
Sorry about that.
the anonymity.
Oh yeah, anonymity, exactly. Hopefully you guys edit that out. Sound kind of silly.
It's good to be silly, Matt.
I'm confounding my own
It's
self.
good. No, it's good for us to. It's good for our humility. I've left a few things in. I was going to edit that out. Nah, it's good for you, Bill. Leave it in.
Well, we'll see what you think about me later on. I'm sure it'll stay in.
Yeah.
When I was out in Akron, it was interesting. They had given kind of a definition of understanding what anonymity is. You could see we're sorting through, and the development not only of the 12 steps, but also the development of the traditions are occurring here. All these different experiences they're having at the group level and stuff. But when I was in Akron, they described the early understanding of anonymity solely as this, as it wasn't so much about anonymity of like at the level of press, radio, and film. It was that when you walked into a meeting, if you sat next to a priest or a police officer or a lawyer or a judge or a blue collar worker or an actual bum or whatever, that you all walked in anonymous to your distinguished level of relationship to the world. You walked in as alcoholics in need of God's help, and you left anonymously left behind whatever state you were at. The Oxford group, they're totally working off of this. You get Bud Firestone sober, and this is going to spread out, and this is how we're going to make this movement go. It's got to be a totally different level of practice here, and the humility needed for the alcoholic. It's totally different.
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing.
Yeah. The Oxford group was starting to have trouble at the local level, the book says. But Bud Firestone, you just mentioned him, he eventually got drunk, and that lost apparently some of the credibility for the group in Akron. And maybe more importantly, and here let me quote from the book, the group had also involved itself in solving or refereeing questions of business ethics among the bigger rubber companies in town. This wasn't viewed with much favor by the industrialists. After all, changing people was one thing, changing business was another. I think that kind of gets down where the rubber meets the road, so to say, eh?
Yeah, and you see this in Bill Wilson's own story. So when he first got connected with the Oxford group, they kept telling him he should stay out of Wall Street.
Yeah.
He shouldn't get himself involved at that level. In the meantime, he's kind of suffering as an individual because he's figuring out how do I support my wife and our family? How do I support the work that I'm trying to do? And he really kind of suffered with that for a while until eventually, and it was some time, he had a real spiritual sense that he needed to go back into the lion's den, if you will, and stay sober in it. And from a Oxford group standing, it would have been considered disobedience. But from his own spiritual sensing, by going back into it, it's actually the preliminary steps that he took to go out to Akron to begin with. If he didn't, decide that he needed to figure this aspect out with his own business affairs himself, he would have never gone out to meet Dr. Bob, and we wouldn't have this thing. This is a place where the Oxford group and AA are starting to make a real separation. It's just kind of understood that you don't meddle, if you will, in the business affairs of another individual, unless the thing that they happen to be in is of a immoral level that would make it preclude sobriety, right?
Well, what the Oxford group people would do was inject themselves into areas of conflict. So if labor was having problems with management, they would insert themselves into that. I mean, there's instances of strikes happening around the country. National Airlines is one of the big ones where the Oxford group inserted themselves. So wherever there's conflict, what I liked about this quote was it was saying, okay, stay out of business things.
Yes.
You guys just stay with your moral things. Don't interfere with my business. which is, I think, one of the real problems we've got today. A lot of our businesses are corrupt. A lot of our national policies are corrupt. The take is, well, stay out of that. The church has no business in that. Well, I think they do.
Well, I think in the Oxford group, there were a lot of cases where the influence at the level of government, or even hear from guys like James Houck, what kind of stuff has happened in the labor,
Yeah,
I think, but in AA, it's so critical
right.
that the conflict isn't between the labor force and the guys in the office. It's the conflict is between the individual and this addictive substance and habit that's going to destroy them. And they
Right.
just can't. You cannot waste any amount of energy on anything other than
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. So we've got the origins of we have no opinion on outside issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and we it's not that we're insular. We can't, we have to, as quoting the thing, first things first, right? We really got to deal and keep things simple. We've got to really focus on this, or we're going to be destroyed. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't have the leisure. I think this is the thing that you start to see is the alcoholics did not have the leisure that the members of the non-alcoholic aspect of the Oxford group did. They had a certain kind of leisure. Right. We did not.
Right. Some tensions were also starting to build with Henrietta Sieberling. She believed that AA shouldn't be involved in raising money, uh, that this was a means that the devil would use to destroy AA. She argued also the point with that point with Bill and Bob. At the same time, she felt the AAs weren't placing quite enough emphasis on God. Here's a nice quote from Henrietta. She says, in the early days, Bill said to me, I don't think we should talk so much about religion or God. I said to him, well, we're not out to please the alcoholics. They have been pleasing themselves all these years. We are out to please God. And if you don't talk about what God does and your faith and your guidance, then you might as well be the Rotary Club or something like that, because God is your only source of power. Finally, she said Bill agreed, but Henrietta had a long and ongoing criticism of Bill Wilson, uh, where he was leading AA. She thought Bill was somewhat egotistical, shall we say. And she might have been right with that.
Well, she might have been. I would imagine that he himself would even admit that too.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we've talked a lot about over many of these podcasts about power and the way that a movement is a conduit for power, right? Power works through a movement. There are places in which, and again, I work with, electric fencing with cattle. I'm a farmer. And there's things you have to look out for, things that are grounding out that power. There's things that are just pulling strength from it. All the time I'm testing the fences and, okay, this is half as hot as the fence should be. And there, when you're inside of a movement, there are things that are actual places of concern where that power is going to be grounded out. In AA, I would say that she was right in the sense that the power itself is from God. And one of the key place where it's going to get grounded out is in the place of money. Now, obviously, also, like we were talking about difficulties that the Oxford group encountered was at the level of prestige. You see again that the traditions are starting to come out of this.
Exactly.
Prophetically, seeing a place where money was going to get interwoven. I think it's when there's a place of medicine, and that becomes. It's interesting that they dodged the bullet of trying to create hospitals and stuff early on. I definitely think that there has been as a movement, as the power of this movement, it's definitely grounded out in those places. And she was right, I think, in a lot of ways.
I think there's lots of room for a different interpretation, a different understanding of the God image. But if you take the God concept out of AA and the Big Book and 12 Step, I don't think you have much left other than the Rotary Club or something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of, brings me back to the Gresham's Law piece, Gresham's Law and Alcoholics Anonymous. Gresham's Law is that bad currency drives out good. He was an economist, and essentially he's just saying if paper money drives out, gold, if you will. This is an old economic
Yeah.
philosophy or whatever. But, weak AA, just go to meetings only AA drives out strong. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get along quite well with certain agnostics in AA. I probably get along less well with people who think they know exactly who God is and they're going to tell you who he is or she is and kind of shove it down your throat. But the God image of some sort must be there.
Yeah, I think of this quote
Yeah.
from Gandhi. I think somebody questioned him on what is religion, and he said, "You want to know a person's religion? Look at how they behave. Look at how
Exactly.
they act." And I think in early AA, again, we're dealing with pre-religious principles like the absolutes. The central introduction of God in an attribute form is truth, and it's like that's where they start off in AA. The very first thing they talk to you about before steps, this is early AA, is get honest with yourself, right? And they're having all these groups. They're introducing people to God in the form of truth,
Yeah.
and that is a fabulous place to start off.
Yeah.
And when you start to get into and again, you see this development occur inside the steps when they're being written, God as you understand him. Each person has to come to their understanding. And the idea was you're going to meet God where you're at.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a problem. They didn't bar people by saying, look, you can't come into this thing unless you have our idea of who God is. Thank God they didn't do that. And they started off with the truth. Like, how about you talk about your condition and get honest about what you've been doing?
This is where the absolutes come in, isn't it, Matt?
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Love is another one. You can measure it by the standard of truth, or you can measure it by the standard of love.
Yeah.
Are you a loving individual? Are you able to love? Are you able to receive love, give love, or is that being blocked in some way? And the purity. I mean, people get real upset about that one and worried about it. But that's kind of back to your fence analogy.
Yes.
Is it 100% coming through, or is there a blockage in the line in the power somewhere? That's what the
Yep.
purity is about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
People miss that one. Okay, so when the break finally does come, interestingly, it isn't in Akron. It came first in Cleveland and came through a character by the name of Clarence Snyder. I wonder if you might be able to tell us a few words about old Clarence. He was quite a character.
Yeah, definitely kind of a character, and they make reference in the book. It's a classic kind of reference in Dr. Bob and the Good Oldtimers. It says, all you need to start a meeting is a couple of people and a coffee pot and a resentment,
Right.
And it's like we talked about this before too. There are characteristics that are both vices and virtues, and egotism, arrogance, that is definitely a vice. And then yet it has, in the person of Bill Wilson and Clarence Snyder, they're very much movers of people, right? They're influencers in a good way. And this is a character very much like that. He's kind of in a way, a Bill Wilson type, and I guarantee if Clarence was alive and he heard me say that, he'd be very pissed at me right now.
And he'd let you know it too, wouldn't he?
I'm sure he would. He actually, there's a personal story of my brother-in-law, is Tom P. Jr., who wrote an account, and it was an interview, I mentioned it earlier, of Bob Evans, the 11th member of AA. He was the King's School group secretary, and he worked directly with Dr. Bob, his sponsor, and he wrote an account of what early AA groups were like, meetings were like. We will read that, I'm positive, when we get there. It made it in this book. But after that was published, Clarence called Tom P. Jr. up to bitch him out for it, and And the whole time, all Tom did was just tell him how much he enjoyed hearing him talk at the different conferences that his dad was at, and really appreciated all the work he did. And it just totally grounded out all the tension and all that. It was just all gone. But Clarence was this type, that would, and these types are needed, right? The people who are willing to kind of break away and they want to start their own thing. Again, this is cell proliferation. This is a place where he's breaking away. His central focus is the alcoholic. He doesn't want anything added to this thing that isn't helpful to the alcoholic by any means. The reasoning for his breakaway is he says, I don't know if this is fully the case or not, I wasn't there, but it seems that his concern was for the Catholics.
Right.
And at the time, if you're a Catholic, you really weren't supposed to attend anything like the Oxford group, especially where there's this outward confession, right? You always had to have a priest for that. AA was able to maneuver around that in a way and make it so Catholics come in, and it became a central focus of AA. That's why they're going out to St. Louis, where it's the groups are started by a Catholic. It's the movement was very Catholic heavy for many years. At that time, Clarence saw this need, and I think he saw both the desire to reach more people, but also just saw that there were certain aspects that just weren't going to work for the alcoholic, and it was time to move on.
Yeah, the Cleveland contingent was driving down to Akron every week for their meeting, and that was getting to be a problem as well, I suppose.
Couldn't have been easy. I mean, it's not that far nowadays, but back then and even now, I mean, if I had to travel all that and work my regular job and everything, it would be very difficult to do.
Yeah, and the car was getting crowded.
They
were packing them in.
And they were really they were really starting to be a lot of members getting sober in the Cleveland area.
Yeah, yeah. I think the book, you correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I spotted the development of sponsorship in this chapter. And it seemed to come about with the hospitalizations that we talked about in the last episode. Hospitalizations in the beginning were required. So here they're quoting Clarence, and he's writing to Bill Wilson. And kind of to justify or at least let Wilson know where the Cleveland contingent was heading. He said to Wilson, "We intend to stress the hospitalizations of all cases possible. In fact, we're trying to make it almost 100%. The man who lines up the new patient assumes the responsibility for him, for visitors, dollars, etc. After he is defogged, we feel him out, then give him the book and lots of conversation." Am I wrong in seeing sponsorship emerging in that quote there?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, I don't think you're wrong, but I think you're absolutely right.
Good, because I was going to end the podcast if you did, Matt.
Let's see if we leave that part in. No, I think it's exactly right. But I think what the kernel of the thing was what the Oxford group called as a sharer, right? And a person who was a sharer was someone who shared about their own lives and about their own sin, if you will, and how they overcame that through the power of surrender and God, Christ. So there was this aspect of sharing this inward material and sharing outwardly to other people. This is where we started to get the speaker meeting aspect of it. They would do it in a more intimate place. They said they'd go up to another room. They'd take a new shaky member and a couple of guys. They would share about themselves. One individual really was the primary person who would tell about themselves and witness. This is coming off of that original thing came from what appeared to be an accident by Frank Bookman, who, like, right after having his spiritual experience or second conversion, if you will, starts telling somebody else about what happened to him and about his resentment and how he's making that right. And then that person starts to share about things they had in their life that was a block. So I think the kernel of it came out of the Oxford group, where they were sharing with one another in that way. And then when it's crossing over into early AA, if you will, is this aspect of having a certain kind of responsibility for another individual at the level of their physical defogging. Right, you're going to bring them to the hospital. You're the one the hospital will contact. You're the
Right.
one that will pick them up. You're the one that sees to their physical needs at that time. And I think it's a hybridization of those two things that kind of start to develop into what we later saw as a sponsor. And I think if sponsorship was a thing, it's certainly, out of all the places, and at this point we're talking about AA in Akron, Cleveland, New York. Really not a lot of fuzz going on anywhere else. It's just those primary places. I think if the development of the sponsor starting to take hold anywhere, I think it's definitely in Cleveland. And again, it's coming off of the dynamics of a guy like Clarence Snyder.
I vouch for this guy in some way.
Mm-hmm.
An element of that. I went to a meeting many, many, many years ago in Alabama, I believe it was, where they would not let a person into the main group. They had to go to start in the beginners group,
Mm-hmm.
and you needed to stay there until your sponsor said, no, this guy's ready to come in. I'm kind of bringing him in.
Mm-hmm.
It might take 3 or 4 months.
And that same thing's developing out of Cleveland. They have certain requirements for the person to actually start to go to the meetings. They'd have to have read the book.
Yeah.
They have to have already started to work with somebody. They had requirements. It wasn't bus terminal AA where you just came in and sat down and left. There were requirements for attendance.
Bus terminal AA. I like that expression. I think that's the first time I've heard that. Going to use that one. All right. The book talks about a fellow by the name of Warren, and he calls himself a noble experiment because apparently he was the first one to successfully come into the program without going through the hospital, and it worked.
It's such a different time. I mean, we can't even imagine that now. I mean, so many people do get quote unquote defogged, detoxed, or whatever you want to call it, but by no means is that. I don't even think that's the majority anymore. Maybe, but yeah, it's such a different time.
Such a different time, right. So that finishes chapter 12. 13 is focused on the spread of the new AA movement, and talks about the famous Saturday Evening Post article. It doesn't go into it in great detail, but that gave AA a huge boost of publicity. It also talks about a less well-known article that Dr. Bob himself wrote for Your Faith magazine. And I researched both of those, put a link to them in the show notes. That'll really make some interesting reading. I don't think we have time to go into them in detail here, but they were starting to get the word out, and as a result of the publicity they were gaining, new members were starting to flood in.
Yeah, this is we were talking about anonymity earlier. It's interesting when you go back and read a lot of this stuff. There's a mention to it, I think, in the first edition foreword or whatever to the big book. Certainly, there is in this Your Faith, I think that's what it's called, article. That I don't think at the time, it seems like when there's a reference to it in the Dr. Bob and Good Oldtimers, I don't think they had access to that piece. I don't think they had.
They didn't have internet back then?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the piece later was found somehow and circulated amongst AA people, nerds like you and I.
Yeah.
But they make reference to anonymity, and they're saying that anonymity was crucial to them. Not only just because of the aspect of trying to be humble or something. They were desperately afraid. Dr. Bob, was this is a person who is working as a few hours a day trying to survive, barely making it. And the deep concern was that Akron was going to get flooded with alcoholics and they weren't going to be able to handle it. And so they were anonymous in that sense. They were concerned about their current ability to help people. And if you think about it, it's like the Fellowship, which now probably numbers 2 million. I mean, anybody who needs a sponsor, you got 2 million, options out there. But that time, it was few and far between. There was a lot more in the way of newcomers, and there were people who were sober a couple of years. Dr. Bob would be 4 or 5 years sober at this point, and they were bottom heavy, and that was a big concern.
There's also something you can lose, you do lose with numbers, and that's the sense of intimacy. I mean, I've done a lot of work with group therapy and things of that nature. There's just so many people in a group after which, if it grows beyond that, it loses that sense of intimacy.
That was the thing where strong AA, out of that particular occurrence, opened the doors for medium AA. I think that tendency happened in Cleveland, and it was because, and again, they did do, there were certain requirements for people to come in, but I think it was just the actual explosion of numbers had it in such a way that the guy would come in, somebody would be his sponsor, quote unquote, and then, you take him to that meeting, and then, all right, now it's time for you to go take out the next guy and do the same thing. And these guys were sober, only a couple of weeks and working with somebody else. And they had to, because there wasn't anybody else.
Yeah. How you strike that balance between intimacy and spreading the word. It's a difficult balance to keep, I've found.
That's my view of it. These things are a little bit different in the sense that I mean, at this time, you're going to go to AA, you're only going to be able to attend a couple of meetings. And now the entire movement is just, splintered out into, I don't know how many meetings there are, 100,000 something meetings or whatever it is worldwide. And I think this is a development that's occurred inside the fellowship over time. Is at one point, I think there was a real mixture, and now I see it almost more of like cream separating from milk or something. It's like the people who are really strong, seeking strong recovery and are looking for it, they can find those kinds of groups.
But you got to search.
You do have to search. But I think anybody who is serious and is searching, they'll find groups where people are really serious about going through the steps, or two-way prayer, or just are really serious about God, serious about all the things that Henrietta Seiberling is talking about. They're finding that, and they can find it.
Right. Or they can start it.
Or they can found one. Yep, that's exactly right.
And that's an important consideration, too. So there's lots more in this chapter about AA spreading through the Midwest, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis. Also, the same thing is going on back east. They'd kind of, if a guy was leaving town and they'd worked with him for a while, they'd give him a big book. It was kind of like missionary work. Okay, you're off to Houston. Go start the program down there. It's first century Christianity, in effect.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
The whole movement came out of that, right?
Right. And then when Constantine comes along, it screws it all up, makes it, if AA became the official, doctrine of the country, I mean, we'd be in even worse shape than we are, Anyway, we won't go there. So much for that chapter. But the book has a beautiful chapter about one of the lesser known figures in AA, and that is Sister Ignatia at St. Thomas Hospital. And Dr. Bob started off his work at Akron City Hospital, but apparently after a while, they weren't too happy with all these drunks showing up and taking up beds and taking up room and running down the hallways and stuff. And he moves over to St. Thomas Hospital. And Sister Ignatia is the one who very much behind the scenes made that possible. Tell us a little bit about her.
I think one of the things that I find quite fascinating, and this is just my own intimations of it, but when Dr. Bob gives his last major talk, he makes reference to the absolutes. I actually, kept this for myself. It says, debate it any way you want to, but the fact remains that the average individual can never acquire absolute love. I suspect there are few people who do. I think maybe I know some who come pretty close to it. but I could count them on the fingers of one hand, right? I always thought that he was referring to Sister Ignatia when he made that reference to those who he thinks have come pretty close to absolute love. And there is a quote inside this chapter, and he's referring to Sister Ignatia. He says, "My dear sister," I guess this is a note from Dr. Bob. "It is most fortunate for me that I have been blessed with the friendship of one so staunch and true as yourself. You have demonstrated in so many ways your love, loyalty, and kindness that I cannot even begin to thank you adequately. In a lifetime, one may meet one or two wonderful characters like yourself. So for my rare privilege of knowing you, I feel most humbly grateful. May God's blessing be ever on you. With a great deal of love, Dr. Bob Smith." And I think that this is one of those people who did come really close to absolute love. I guess, there's a portion of the church would call such a person a saint.
Right.
I can't, I don't have the credentials to declare her such, but I think that's what you see here. And this is somebody who embodied absolute love, and it came out in so many ways. And I think this is what made her, she had this, again, we talk about the kinship of suffering, or one alcoholic talking to another. Absolute love has this way of being able to communicate. And I think this is why she was able to talk to drunks. She was able to help drunks. All these beautiful accounts of her. I really recommend that anybody who's reading this book, they really read about her, because she's such a beautiful person. Has made such an impact. We're talking about the anonymity and about how the Oxford group did use individuals. They sought out to use individuals. In the AA thing, it's like God sought out to use individuals directly. And one of the ones he used, people like Dr. Bob, who happened to have some kind of medical understanding and knowledge.
Right.
These people were trying to use their AA wisdom within the realm of their expertise. So Dr. Bob ends up bringing this thing into a hospital, and he and Sister Ignatia touched the lives of 5,000 people, her, many more after. Bill Wilson was a salesperson, right? It's like God uses the actual, strength of these individuals to touch more lives. The movements are a little bit different because I think they're not directly seeking out in AA individuals for their attributes. They're seeking them out because their life is, they're suffering and they're going to die, and we look out for our own. But of all the characters in AA history, I think that when we come up against Sister Ignatia, we've got something really rare and really, really kind of beautiful.
Do you think, and I suspect I heard this in the early part of your answer, that in her own way, she suffered as well, so that she was able to empathize with the plight of the alcoholics that she met?
There's certain pioneering members in AA that are of the non-alcoholic squad, if you will.
Right.
You get like a Carl Jung or something like that. And these are people who had come up against, it seems to me, they all come up against the place within yourself where there is a capability of losing all sanity and all relationship to your bearings of all that we consider to be life. And they come up against it and are like, they could very well. And I think this is the Carl Jung analogy relates to Sister Ignatia. I think both of them came up against the sanity and were right on the precipice of it, and almost went over into some deep, serious insanity. And something came in, and they had an experience. And I think it's most seen, that same kind of experience is most seen with the alcoholic, with the agent of alcohol as an addiction, pushing them towards that, where they come through the eye of a needle, as different individuals. Sister Ignatia, I think, had the same thing. I think she really had come very close to insanity and having a real mental breakdown, and came out the other end. In that regard, it's without a substance. She had the exact same experience as an alcoholic.
Apparently, so did Jesus, gets the baptism, and the Spirit immediately turns into the devil appears, You got to go to the dark side.
That is a great analogy, because in the Christian thing, you see that Christ is shred of all. There is nothing of dependence in Christ's picture. He ends up with no one by his side, if you will. He's betrayed. He's
everybody abandons.
He has nothing, right? So this is absolute surrender, is to have nothing. It's the ego structure. We're built into it, and it's there, right? And it's like you can't take. This is the thing that Tebow would say. Self-will can't surrender itself. You have to have this thing stripped away, and that's what happened to Sister Ignatia. She had this thing stripped away from her and came out a completely different person. And that's a person who can communicate with the alcoholic, because she's had identically the same experience without alcohol.
And that's a person who the alcoholic ought to be able to identify with as well, and not to make this demand that, well, you must be an alcoholic if I'm going to relate to you. That's simply not true.
And you read the accounts of her with alcoholics, she had an authority with the alcoholics that transmitted, and an alcoholic can understand authority. They know all about it. Right? Yeah. they've been disobeying it most of their lives, and in certain places and obeying it in others. Right? We'd say that alcohol, in a way, is a power greater than ourselves. But that's what she was able to communicate that,
and they knew it when they saw it.
Oh yeah. She sounded like she did not mess around, and neither did Dr. Bob. But that authority came through her own experience, right? And they could understand it.
Yeah, Ed Dowling might have been another example of that in some way. Suffered in his own way that transcended the drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, not to go into the weeds too far, but I think Carl Jung had that. He literally had an experience of going into the wilderness, the wild parts of yourself, where you depart from ego.
This is the inner journey.
Yeah.
This is the inner journey that I think is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And the church tries to intervene and say, well, you don't need to go on the inner journey. Oh, yes, you do. And AA tries to intervene, and say, you don't need to go on the inner journey. And yes, you do. And I think that's what distinguishes those in the program who have gone on it and come out the other side.
And I think it's the thing where God uses the foolishness, the spiritual foolishness, to confine the wise. These are accounts where people are literally on the verge of losing themselves. Like, you're going to lose yourself.
Am I going crazy? And
it's the only way, and I know it sounds so cliche and almost embarrassing to say, but this is how you find yourself, right?
That's right. You got to make the leap and trust. Sister Ignatia, I'm going to skip some of the origins. I made some notes here about the evolution of the hospital program. Not too interested in that, but it is in the book for those of you who are interested in. But Ignatia, Sister Ignatia, was helping the addicts through some of their step work. There's a nice quote that Sister Ignatia said, there was one thing that always irritated Dr. Bob. Some people who were on the program for a length of time would come up to him and say, I don't get the spiritual angle. And she's quoted here, I heard him say time and again, there is no spiritual angle. It's a spiritual program.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so clear that the efforts to compartmentalize the spiritual, part out of AA it's not possible, because it is the whole thing. And they were so crystal clear about that. They just knew it.
Yeah. And that goes on to say she helped some of them with their fourth and fifth steps. She helped them making their amends lists. They recognize that in her. You can see the start of some family counseling going on here, encouraging the families to stay together if it was at all possible, and to take responsibility for their part. I think she really got that Oxford group angle. Take responsibility for your part of the mess that is here. So critical. Well, Matt, this is I think a really good place to stop. I think we've got maybe a couple of more episodes to go through. It's been a good experience to go back and pick this book up again, and I would encourage people to really try to do that. If you want to get into the AA history, you're going to learn a lot about the original program, what it had to offer, how it was different, what it satisfies that maybe just going to meetings is not going to satisfy you. So I'd encourage you.
That's going to answer questions like, oh, geez, should I, work on the first step for 6 months until I really get it down? You read Sister Ignatia, she's taking these guys through the steps.
Boom, boom, boom.
And they're in the hospital.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to answer a lot of questions.
Why? Because you wanted to get to an experience of the divine. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's exactly
you have to have an experience of it, not head knowledge of it.
Yep.
And if you will do this work, the work of the steps, it's going to remove the barriers, the obstacles that are getting in the way of a very natural relationship that ought to exist, does exist, between each and every one of us and our Creator. Call it by whatever name you like. I could care less. But that's the journey.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know you're winding it up, but the power that occurs inside of a movement and the concern of it grounding out in certain key places, each individual has to guard or husband. It says in the scriptures to husband your own strength, right?
Or to wife it to get a little more modern here.
It means to protect the strength that God has given you to do this thing, and to watch out for places where it's going to get that strength will get grounded out, right, and robbed from you.
Yeah, and watch is the key word, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's exactly right.
Yeah, you got to watch. Yeah, it's one of the AAA things that I love from Tom Powers. If you don't watch, you won't know what the hell to pray for.
Yep.
Best line I've come across in a long, long while. If you don't watch, you won't know what the hell to pray for. If you don't do step 10, you're not going to do step 11.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Tell us, I wanted to save a minute or two. Tell us a little bit about AAA, what its intent is, and a little invitation to the meetings.
Yeah, thank you. Its intention is to try to live by this, where the spiritual energy of this program was at its, in my view, at its highest, and was practiced in all your affairs. It was so all that we're reading here, where it's very much part of individuals around the addict, the family, the 4 absolutes, 12 steps, the book, the 10 points comes out of chapter 5. It's an attempt to try to live this program, which was one that was in all your affairs. We do have meetings on the All Addicts Anonymous website, which you gracefully put up as a link. We do have meetings, several meetings online during the week. Many of them focus on the steps, other focus on the principles. Everybody, of course, is welcome. Thank you for that.
Very good. Yeah, check it out. Check the book out. And now it's time for us to check out. So, Matt, thank you very much for another wonderful episode. Love doing this stuff with you. You know the history, but more importantly than that, I think you're a man who's living the history, and I really appreciate that about you. So thanks so much for sharing that with us.
You too. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you guys for listening. Hope this was helpful, and I really appreciate the support. If you're able to help support this channel and financially and or spread the word with other alcoholics and addicts or 12-step people, or even a non-addict out there who needs it. Let them know about it. So thank you guys so much. Thanks for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.